Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Alexander Keyssar joins us to discuss his book, Why Do We Still Have the Electoral College? Good question. Meanwhile, Biden has imposed additional sanctions on Russia, fully blocking 2 major Russian banks, sanctions on Russian debt, and more. Biden has been clear that the U.S. won't engage in the fighting, but has sent troops, aircrafts, and arms to Ukraine. Europe, in addition to the UK and Germany imposing their own penalties, is bracing for Ukrainian refugees. The U.S. troops who arrived in Poland over the past few weeks will reportedly assist in any refugee effort. The Supreme Court has formally rejected Trump's request to block his presidential documents from the January 6th committee. And a Portland man has been identified as the shooter that killed 1 woman and injured 5 others at a BLM rally over the weekend.
Reportedly a subscriber to Andy No.
Andy No?
Yep.
Well, that makes sense, given that his roommate was quoted and said that, quote, he talked about wanting to go out and shoot commies and Antifa all the friggin' time. In Florida, the Don't Say Gay bill continues to move through the legislature for discussion, and on Friday, an amendment was proposed that would essentially require schools to out students to their parents within 6 weeks of discovering the identity of the child. Luckily, the lawmaker was pressured into withdrawing that amendment shortly before the show today, but that bill is still egregious and could pass. And lastly, the tech gods have bestowed us with a gift. Starbucks missed a legal deadline to bust union efforts in dozens of their shops by 8 minutes. Needed to do it by noon, and they did it by 12:08. Pathetic and sad. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, everybody. Sam is out on this hump day. He really insists on continuing to make that a thing, but like, look, I can't even help it in his absence. It's my tribute to him. But he'll be back next week. Just a reminder to everybody, I'll be hosting for the rest of this week. It's been fun so far. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's been couldn't have been a crazier time for him to leave with what's happening with
really
Russia,
going on, yeah.
Right? And that seems to be dominating the news. As understandably so, but there are a lot of smaller stories out there that we want to hit on this program today. I just want to also start off by giving Biden a bit of credit. I am in favor of a lot of what he's been doing over the past few days in response to this Russian aggression. He's been steadfast about no U.S. troops, selling helicopters and planes to Ukraine or giving them to them. I think that's understandable, giving it to the government, not to, covertly to militias on the ground. I think that's fair at this point. And I think sanctions targeting specifically elite oligarchs and Russian power players is a reasonable approach to what we've been dealing with.
I think on that point, though, it remains to be clear if we're going to have sanctions that are like so targeted.
Well, the point is that that's just so far, right? Because you have Boris Johnson saying this is the first tranche. If Russia goes further, there could be more sanctions. And then my analysis will change if those sanctions are less specific and targeted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I just think expect the worst on that front. Like, so that's why, like, I think, like, yes, I think we need to I don't know what I'm trying, like, why I'm trying to quibble so much, but I do think, like,
No, I think it's fair.
you need to like be honest about what's going on with regards to Russia. But I do think, like, I don't trust these sanctions regimes to be targeted like this. I'll wait and see, I guess. Like, if that's, I'm not going to like give my affirmation to it, or
Fair enough.
consent to it before seeing that, oh, it actually did just target the people who are like laundering money through like New York high rises and stuff like that.
Fair enough, but a full backing of two major Russian banks, sanctions on the trading of Russian debt in European markets sounds specifically targeted towards elites. If it goes further, again, my analysis will likely change. It's just, it also is interesting. We were talking before the show about the U.S., even though Biden's getting dragged over the coals for this, is probably fairly thrilled that that this has shut down the Nord Stream pipeline effectively. Let's get into that discussion, actually, because Peter Doocy, the son of Steve Doocy and upcoming White House beat reporter, had an exchange with Jen Psaki about the threat of climate change. Now, he's essentially trying to catch the Biden administration in a lie or in a weak moment, because they had spoken about in the past a report that they'd received from the military that global warming, climate change, was the greatest national security threat that this country would face. Doocy's like, I gotcha. It's Russia now. And here's how Psaki responded.
Spring that Pentagon generals had.
Yeah, go back.
The president said in the spring that Pentagon generals had briefed him that the greatest threat facing America is global warming. Is that still the assessment now that we are facing down a potential cyber war with Russia?
Well, let me first say there is no, we are always prepared for any threat that any outside entity or country poses to the United States that relates to cyber or anything else. There is no current pending threat on as it relates to cyber. In terms of the threats you're touching on, that was a briefing from the military, so I'd point you to them.
And so, as far as anybody watching who's seen the coverage, it's very, at times, distressing images of Russian military movements. The number one threat facing the country right now remains global warming.
Yes.
Well, Peter, I think it's important, as we're all educating the public here, to convey and reiterate the president has no intention of sending U.S. troops into Ukraine to fight in Ukraine. What we are doing is we are abiding by our obligations to our NATO allies and partners to ensure that they have the support and the resources that they need. And that is our right and our obligation as the United States.
Okay. And why?
Yeah, so there's so much there. Can someone please ask Peter Doocy if oil and gas played any role in Russia's escalation in Ukraine? Because obviously it did. Why do you think Russia feels that can be so aggressive? Because with Saudi Arabia and the United States, they're the top oil producers in the world.
I mean, what's been our almost most explicit interest in this is the Nord Stream thing.
And same with Germany. That's part of what some of their hesitancy was to get involved. Over 25% of Germany's energy comes from Russian oil and gas. And so there is, of course, a reliance. And I mean, look at the past two major wars in Afghanistan, I should say mostly just in Iraq, but the past war in Iraq, that had very much to do with oil and gas concerns. So of course, that's a huge part of our national security. In fact, it's a driving force in our national security. A second point, I'm also amused by his sudden concern about cyber warfare by Russians. It's just interesting. I mean, I didn't hear that in 2016. Now, we're not going to get into Russiagate here. I'm not going to talk about, I mean, look, a lot of this was overplayed, and I found it to be a laughable assertion by the United States that meddling in the way that Russia did was beyond the pale, given our very well-documented history. But regardless, Republicans like Ducey were mocking that very notion just 5-6 years ago. So,
because it's to their benefit.
Right, when it was to their benefit. Now they're very concerned about the national security threat of Russian cyber warfare. And besides all of that, the number one point is that the direct consequences of climate change are clearly a bigger threat to us. I missed the part where Russia was lining up troops on the border of the United States, or if they were off, on aircraft carriers near our borders. No, that's not what's happening here. And the Biden administration has been explicit about not involving U.S. troops in combat there. Now, that can change, and then we're, having a separate conversation, and their role is different than us, and we're trying to promote no death at pretty much at all costs. But for the global national security of the United States specifically, as people who work for the United States government, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. That climate change is a greater national security threat to the country that's military is multiple times over the size of the next largest military after it. Yes, climate change, the existential threat of it, is the greatest threat to the largest army and defense systems on Earth by many times over. So, all right, folks, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will be joined by Alex Keyssar. We are back for now. We are just waiting on Alex for a little bit. No need to worry. We can get to some other stories in the meantime. We had a viewer write in a few times about this story, and I headlined it, but I wanted to make sure that we gave it its full attention because this is important. This is a story about a tragic and just honestly frightening and angering shooting in Portland. A woman was killed by clearly somebody who has been radicalized by the far right, and he also injured 5 other people at a Black Lives Matter anti-police brutality protest in Portland over the weekend. Now, the police shared his name on yesterday. I don't really feel like saying it because I think, a lot of times these people like notoriety, and that's often what they're seeking. But this individual lived in an apartment complex or an apartment across from Normandale Park for more than a decade, has harbored growing animosity against Black Lives Matter protesters, COVID-19 mask mandates, unhoused Portlanders, and liberals, according to his roommate, Christine Christensen. Smith's brother told the Oregonian that Smith would often complain about the Justice for Patrick Kimmons demonstrations that regularly took place in Normandale Park. Kimmons was a black man killed by Portland police in 2018. Kimmons supporters had gathered Saturday evening at Normandale to hold a demonstration in support of Amir Locke, a black man killed by Minneapolis police earlier this month. Christensen told the Oregonian that Smith collected guns and kept at least 4 in his bedroom. He talked about wanting to go shoot commies and Antifa all the friggin' time, the roommate told OPB.
Yeah, I read some purported text chats of the guy, and it was talking on some Nazi forum, and one of the people made a joke, and this is important to think of in the context of who Abbott is delivering for in Texas with this anti-trans stuff, but saying things like, we have as many guns as they have genders, and this guy supposedly coming in and saying, no, you have to be ready to actually shoot. Don't pretend like this is just a joke, guys. We need to be serious about this stuff. So, I mean, completely disgusting. And again, like, who's being appealed to by this sort of this bigotry and this anti-CRT stuff and this anti-Black Lives Matter backlash? It's these fascists.
These kinds of people, right? The roommate also added this quote, which is telling. He was just a sad, angry dude. He talked about wanting to do this for a while. He was angry at the mask mandates. He was angry at the damned liberals. So it all just, again, comes together in a stew of aggrievement. That's really what it is. And for people who are mentally unbalanced and radicalized at the same time, it turns into violence often. And this is heavily weighted on the side of the right wing.
Yeah, and
that's what these guys are, fascist foot soldiers, and they're being conditioned in this way.
And Andy who I would ban from Twitter, because I think he's a dishonest right-wing propagandist with ties to actual groups that like this sort of violence. That's my opinion. I would just say that. So this is, and he said this is in response to an Antifa sort of action, right? According to witness, Smith approached 4 unarmed women gathered near Normandale Park and yelled at them to leave. The women were all volunteers assisting march organizers in slowing down traffic to allow demonstrators to march down the street. And he started calling them bad names and stuff, and then they didn't he didn't like them telling him to shut up, so he shot him.
Yeah. As I'm sure he probably speaks about how Black Lives Matter is excusing violence or looting, creating chaos and violence, doesn't respect law and order. I'm just going to go commit a murder.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They feel justified because of the radicalizing content, like what Matt described.
And I mean, that's Andy Ngo's role, I think, is to foment this sort of, we call it stochastic terrorism, where it's this idea that you don't inspire or direct any given action, but you turn up the temperature and basically make people so bad about things like gender and Black Lives Matter protests that they take
or mask mandates.
Or mask
it's all
mandates.
The same thing.
Exactly. It's Nazism. Remember, that's what the entire fucking Republican propaganda outlet from Charlie Kirk to Fox News has been saying this is just like Hitler, and Elon Musk too. Well, what do you do to the Nazis, right?
Yeah.
Right. What response does that?
What do you do to someone who stole the election?
Exactly. And so
the election was stolen, the democracy, and your guys, right? If you genuinely believe that, right? Exactly. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. Hopefully, we'll be able to get Alex in. We are back, and we are joined by Alexander Keyssar, Matthew W. Sterling Jr. Professor of History and Social Policy at Harvard University, of that, I should say, on his book, Why Do We Still Have the Electoral College? Alex, thank you so much for being here today. It's all good. It's all good. It's kind of just the nature of the beast these days. But I'm looking forward to our conversation because I didn't realize how unpopular the Electoral College always was until I mean, not maybe even always, but to me, in current day or in modern politics, it reminds me a bit of how Congress has a low approval rating all the time, or media. People want it to be changed, but it's likely that if any reforms or solutions were proposed, they would probably be met with seismic mistrust. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that. What's your diagnosis for why the Electoral College is so unpopular, not just today, I guess, but throughout history?
Well, the Electoral College, I think without doubt, the Electoral College has been our most unpopular institution. There were serious attempts to try to revise it or abolish it starting roughly 220 years ago. More constitutional amendments have been introduced in Congress to get rid of the Electoral College than on any other subject. And the polling data that we have, which goes back only to the 1940s, indicates that a majority of the American population would like to get rid of it. I mean, I think there are a number of different factors that feed into this dislike, and some have been more salient at some periods than others. But the Electoral College doesn't conform to basic democratic values. It does not conform to one person, one vote. In its original design, it was subject to manipulation. For example, winner take all is not in the Constitution. That most states, 48 states, use winner take all, stems from the fact from basically gaming the system, and most states figuring that they have more weight if they assign electoral votes on a winner take all basis, which of course distorts the process and makes it easier for somebody who didn't win the popular vote to be elected president. I mean, that's just for starters in a way. But this is really a very unpopular institution. And we've come very close to getting rid of it on a couple of occasions.
Well, I'm hoping that you can lay out some of those occasions for us. But when you bring up the winner take all part of it, can you lay out how that came to be, or expand on it a bit? Because you talk a little bit about how the system was meant to mirror some of the separation of powers that exist in Congress, which also sometimes cause dysfunction. But that, I mean, the winner take all nature, you did say that that's so states could kind of maximize their power, but that certainly isn't as in keeping with the proportional representation part of the House that they might have been trying to copy, I guess.
No, that's absolutely right. Look, the wording that the framers settled on was that electors will be chosen in such manner as the legislatures of each state shall decide. So constitutionally, the legislature of each state has a right to decide how electors will be chosen. In the first 10 years or 12 years, that varied. Legislatures sometimes had district elections, where electors were chosen by district. And so the electoral vote of a state could have been 6-3. But as parties formed, and we have to remember that there were no political parties when the Constitution was written, but there was ferocious partisanship within about 10 to 15 years. And as parties formed, gaining partisan advantage looked like an increasingly important thing to do from the perspective of parties. So that what happened was that legislatures themselves chose electors, often on a winner-take-all basis, or they had elections and used winner-take-all. That went back and forth. There was a lot of jockeying about that for the first 30 or 40 years of the country's existence. And on 5 occasions, the Senate approved constitutional amendments that would have banned winner-take-all and required that electors be chosen by district. On one of those occasions, it passed the Senate and was only a few votes short of the needed 2/3 majority in the House. That was in 1821.
Wow.
So we came within a whisker of getting rid of winner-take-all after that, but then it didn't happen. And then, the logic of everybody was, well, if you're going to do it, then we're going to do it too. So
kind of what we're seeing with gerrymandering right now, right?
Exactly. You're gonna bend the rules. You're not going to respect the spirit of the Constitution. Well, we're not going to either, and that's how we ended up with winner take all. There have been a lot of attempts since the 1840s to undo that, and states alone can decide to do that, but it's not necessarily in their partisan political interest to do so. I mean, right now, Maine and Nebraska do not use winner take all.
Right. And you mentioned how within, a few decades, there was already intense partisanship in the country. That does seem to coincide with the calls for reforms at the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century of the Electoral College. I mean, what was in the mindset of reformers at the time, people who wanted to change it? And it wasn't tweaked in the 12th Amendment. So what was, I guess, the thinking of Americans and lawmakers at that time?
I think their thinking was that the system that they had created, which said you can choose electors in such manner as the legislature can decide, it had created 2 problems. One was that there was no uniformity across the country. Different states were using different systems, and that didn't seem like the right thing for a national election. And the second was that it was unstable. States were changing how they chose electors depending on which political party was in power and what they thought was to their advantage. And you see this jockeying going on. I mean, switching back and forth. And fights going on about it. We often talk about the election of 1824, which was when John Quincy Adams became president, even though Andrew Jackson had more popular votes. And it's often said, well, Jackson won the popular vote. Well, a lot of states didn't hold elections, and there was no popular vote. New York, the legislature at the last minute just decided to choose electors by itself. So it was to end that kind of maneuvering and gaming of the system that reformers pressed again and again. And we should add here that they had as allies, people like James Madison, the leading framer of the Constitution. He himself thought the system should be changed.
But I mean, I would guess that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madison and other Northern lawmakers were probably a lot more aligned in that perception than Southern lawmakers who, to this day, the lack of a national popular vote benefits.
Well, Madison was in fact from Virginia, but the Southern, there were. I mean, you're raising yet another issue and objection, which was that by another part of the Constitution specified that each state would get a number of electors equivalent to the number of representatives it had in the House of Representatives plus 2 for its 2 senators. So it would mirror its congressional delegation. Well, those congressional delegations for the South were weighted upwards substantially by the 3/5 clause, which meant that Southern states got credit for towards seats in the House for 3/5 of their slaves. Northern anti-slavery leaders, representatives, senators, very much wanted to get rid of the 3/5 clause, but the South was unyielding about that, and for good reason from their point of view. It would have meant a significant loss of power, and likely the earlier abolition of slavery.
So another thing I wasn't aware of was that, or maybe I knew it, but it's just in the back of my mind somewhere, rattling around, that the term electoral college is not in the Constitution. I mean, how did it then get so nationally codified so quickly?
Well, it didn't happen so quickly. That was a surprise to me too, that it wasn't in the Constitution, and that it was really so slow. You see almost no references to it in the first 10, 20, 30 years. And then the references are to the electoral colleges, which is the meeting when New York State's electors meet in Albany on the specified day. That it was called a College of Electors of New York, or New Jersey's Electoral College. It was used as a plural. It's not until the 20th century, and I'm not exactly sure how it happens, that it becomes a reference to the entire system and the shorthand system. There's a book, for example, which arcane book that I and 3 other people have read, but it's a book written in the late 19th century by a legal scholar about the presidential electoral system. It's 700 pages long, and it never uses the term electoral college.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. And it's fascinating to me how our Constitution, it's supposed to be amended, right? And it was many times, and yet an institution that isn't even mentioned has a durability that other institutions have not, despite its flaws from the outset.
Oh, absolutely. And and with respect to the Electoral College, I mean, I think that it's fair to say that the framers in Philadelphia in 1787 did not regard this as their finest work. They had a lot of trouble deciding how a president should be chosen, and they went round and around all summer. They came up with the Electoral College only in a kind of mad dash process. At the end of the summer, it was very hot in Philadelphia. They wanted to get out of there. They were under political pressure to come up with a draft of the Constitution, and they appointed a committee which really did it. And some of the framers even commented precisely to your point, saying, "Well, this isn't so great, but we have a system for amending the Constitution." But in fact, amending the Constitution is a lot harder than they realized. And if you think about it, after the Bill of Rights, which is passed in the immediate wake of the adoption of the Constitution, there have been less than 20 successful amendments to the Constitution in 200 years.
Right. I mean, it's unfathomable today that we would be able to achieve that. I mean, yeah. even in the can you talk a little bit about the 20th century
Sure.
efforts, because that gives us better context of how we took steps to entrenching this along the way.
Absolutely. The history did not end in 1840. And let me do this as a kind of let me make 2 broad points here. One is that the advantage that Southern states got from the structure of the Electoral College did not end with slavery. It could have ended with slavery if, in fact, African Americans had been successfully enfranchised after the Civil War, and there was a constitutional amendment which seemed to enfranchise them. But in fact, what happens in the South in the late 19th century is that African Americans, despite the 15th Amendment, are completely disenfranchised, or 95% disenfranchised. At the same time, they are now counting 100%, not 60%, not 3/5, but 5/5 towards representation in Congress. so that in fact, but they're not able to vote, which means that white Southerners are getting even more clout in the selection of presidents than they had before. That's because to state this simply, the Electoral College is structured so that a state gets weight in the presidential vote depending on its population, not on how many voters it has. Okay, so that's part of the key backdrop here. It is the South that lobbies ferociously and resists and says it will not in any way permit Electoral College reform in the late 19th century and in the 20th century. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about Bai's effort in the what was it, 69 to 70-ish?
Yes. No, that is where I was headed.
Right. I'm just easing you towards there.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was taking a circuitous path, I realize. But things start to change in the 1960s, finally, for several different reasons. One, with respect to the South, is that the Voting Rights Act and a number of other pieces of legislation and court cases are succeeding in enfranchising African Americans. The other is there really is a growth of democratic sentiment and commitment to democratic ideology, which comes out of World War II, the Cold War also, and it's even underscored by very important Supreme Court decisions about Congress and state legislatures in the 1960s. And these are the court decisions which say you have to have one person, one vote, that all votes should count equally. And the Supreme Court really gives a ringing affirmation of that as a principle. And it doesn't take a great leap of imagination to say, well, shouldn't that apply to presidential elections also? So the pressure builds, and the effort is led in the Senate by Birch Bayh, an Indiana senator, a young liberal Indiana senator. There's also strong support in the House, very strong support in the House. And in fact, the House approves a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College and replace it with the national popular vote in the late 1960s. And it does so, I think, as I recall, by an 82% positive vote, right? Democrats and Republicans, an overwhelming support. I mean, again, if you think today, it's hard to think that today's House of Representatives could get an 82% vote on what day it was.
Right.
But they got an 82% vote, and then it went to the Senate. And there were what you might call machinations and maneuvering over the course of a year as Bayh tried to navigate this through. Key committees were controlled by Southern white supremacist senators, including Allen Eastland of Mississippi, Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, and Sam Ervin of North Carolina. And in the end, they mounted a successful filibuster to prevent this constitutional amendment from being approved by the needed two-thirds vote in the Senate. It was a very bitter pill to swallow for reformers.
And it's I didn't know this, but this became a staple of Bayh's career going forward, and so it never really left the conversation, even though it was stymied in that particular effort.
Oh yes, no. I mean, you know, they had lost by just a few votes, and they deeply believed in this, and so Bayh brought it up again and again in the 70s, and then you know, with average success, and it wasn't going to happen really under Nixon. But then in the later 1970s, it comes up again. The House clearly will support an amendment. The Senate is the key arena. and basically the same forces that defeated it, which is to say, some very conservative Republicans coupled with white Southern representatives who were still very wary about changing the system in such a way as would encourage black turnout. Those folks block it again. Although it has to be said that when the vote comes down in the Senate, there are some Northern liberals who vote against reform, a handful of them, and that's not decisive for the vote. The Southern and very conservative Republican vote really determined the outcome. But politically, the fact that several liberals abandoned the reform cause really is what killed it for a time politically. One of those Northern or quasi-Northern liberals who voted against reform, I'm sorry to say, was Joe Biden.
Well, I mean, I'm not particularly shocked. I mean, you mentioned Strom Thurmond a bit earlier in the show, but why was that? Was it safe blue members of safe blue states found that actually grouping or that the Electoral College, I guess, maybe helped their prospects in some way?
You know, it got very messy, and you know, my book is long, and I know few people will read the whole thing, but I recommend this to people. It got messy. I mean, partly there was some sense of political safety, but there were two other things going on in the late 1970s. One was that there was a sizable segment of the black leadership of the country, not so much in Congress, but in the major black organizations, people like Vernon Jordan, very important, who came out against Electoral College reform. They were convinced, Jesse Jackson too, they were convinced that the black vote had been decisive in 1876 because of the Electoral College, that black voters had been key voters in swing states, and thus that the Electoral College magnified their power. And so there was a sizable segment of the African-American community or leadership and newspaper editors who switched position and were against Electoral College reform. So that some of those Northern liberals who voted against did so, in fact, in response to pressures from some black leaders. And black leadership is completely split. I mean, some members of Congress, like John Conyers of Michigan, are ardent reformers, but you know, other people are not. I interviewed Jesse Jackson, you know, for my book, and he sort of said we didn't get it. They were wrong, by the way. They thought that something was a permanent situation, which turned out to have been very peculiar to the election of 1976. The other constituency, for similar reasons, a much smaller population. The other constituency that waffled on the reform issue, or that divided on the reform issue, was the American Jewish community. In fact, all of the Jewish members of Congress voted in favor of reform, but some of the leading Jewish organizations, again, thought it would diminish the clout of American Jews because, as they conceived it at the time, Jews were swing voters in swing states and thus would be courted by both political parties. So again, it wasn't true.
Yeah, I mean, there's an inherently minoritarian quality to the Electoral College, and it seems to have manifested itself in micro ways as well. Yes, in all sorts of micro ways. But you know, tying a couple of threads together, part of the reason it did so was because of winner take all. You know, if winning over the Jewish community in a state, you know, would increase your percentage of the vote by 2%, and the system wasn't winner take all, well, that's a 2% increment. If it's winner take all, it can mean a big block of electoral votes. Right. Well, then now I guess before we have to say goodbye, I want to touch on the present day, because the Electoral College was pretty much universally despised. 2016 comes. Now it's like Republicans are maybe not so sure. Talk a little bit about where we are at in terms of perception currently and why Republicans have become more sympathetic. I mean, it seems a little fairly obvious, but I'm curious to hear your analysis.
Yeah, well, the turn really began in 1980, and it began with Reagan, and it began with the movement of the Republican Party becoming more conservative. And from the 1980s on, the Republican Party was locked into opposition to Electoral College reform because they believed, and they had various analyses that supported this, not very solid ones, but they believed that the Electoral College benefited the Republican Party and hurt the Democrats. And so since the early 1980s, there has been effectively almost no Republican support for Electoral College reform and significant opposition. Now, this view that it helps them was, of course, been underscored by the fact that there were two presidential elections in 2000 and 2016, where the popular vote went for Democrats and the electoral vote went for Republicans. So that has convinced Republicans further, that they can't give up the Electoral College. They are, and one result of that has been a sense of partisan impasse in Congress, such that even many Democratic reformers feel that there is no point bringing it up, or there has been no point in bringing up the question again, because it's a sure loser in Congress, and certainly in the Senate, because they're not going to be able to get 2/3 votes. So that's where things are now. It's a partisan stalemate. But there's a period of the last 40 years, and even more extremely the last 5, 6, 7 years, has been the one period in U.S. history when partisanship has completely dominated the issue of Electoral College reform, and has prevented ideas for reform from being seriously considered. That's not the norm through 200 years of history, but it is where we are today.
Do you think that that's just because, based on, I mean, we have a 50-50 split in the Senate, and the Democrats 50 represent 40 million more people than the Republicans. And in terms of ideas, it's pretty clear where the population lies. Do you think that partisanship is increased by the fact that Republicans kind of seem to inherently benefit from minoritarian structure?
Yes. I think that right now, I think that that's been true in their minds and in reality for 40 years with respect to the Electoral College, but now it's glaringly true with respect to all of our institutions, that Republicans do not believe that they could win majoritarian elections. I mean, you talk about the Senate being 50-50, but of course they represent very different numbers of people. Then again, the House is pretty close too, and that's more proportional to population. But I think that defending the Electoral College has now become a key prong of the preservation of the possibilities of minority government and minority power.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with me today. Everybody should check out Alexander Keyssar's book. It is called "Why Do We Still Have the Electoral College?" Alex, thank you so much. Glad we were able to power through with any technical difficulties.
So am I, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk about this.
Of course. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, come back, wrap up the first hour of the show. We are back. Anyway, that is going to be it for the first hour of the show. Matt, Left Reckoning is tonight, I do believe, good sir.
Yeah, Left Reckoning is tonight. It is a pre-taped episode, which we can't specify why. More on that in the coming weeks.
I know.
But we have a fun show. Chase Woodruff, he's a reporter out of Colorado for Colorado Newsline. He also has a Substack called Lit Out West, which speaks to me. He focuses on we talk about what it was possibly the first American Western, a book by John Rollins Ridge called The Life and Adventures of Joaquin Murrieta. And we talk about that book and how John Rollins Ridge's father was one of the Cherokees who signed the treaty that led to the Trail of Tears. So he had let's say a first row look at racial conflict and stuff in America, and he wrote a novel about it in 1854. So we talk a little bit about that. We talk about a story out of Douglas County in South Denver, I believe, where the school board, the right-wing anti-CRT folks took a narrow majority over the school board and wanted to get rid of a superintendent that's been there for 25 years because they had some equity policies. And there's a massive sick out, and people are mobilizing against the CRT lunacy, which is nice to see. So we talk about that as well. And get into Elon Musk, the extremely racist factory in Fremont, California, and him abusing animals. A lot of this stuff explains a little bit of why he might be moving to Texas, and the culture as far as can you have a place called The Plantation where you segregate black workers into your factory? Well, Texas might be a little bit more slow to file a lawsuit on stuff like that. So anyway, all that tonight, patreon.com/leftreckoning to watch the show. And I'll be doing a Twitch stream afterwards in lieu of the post game.
Oh, very cool. All right, we are going to head into the fun half. 646-257-3920. Just Coffee.coop, fair trade, tea, coffee, or chocolate. Use the code majority, get 10% off your order. Boom. We'll see you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you. And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Now we're back. We are back. Gonna be taking some calls. There was somebody who's been on the line for a long time, and might have overheard me talking about some stuff. 330, who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Willow the Wendigo. I'm a YouTuber, and I didn't know if I was calling in too early. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We don't usually open the phone lines in the first hour of the program, but you'd called in early. We were just trying to work with Alex on some of his tech stuff, so that's why you heard us chatting. How are you?
I'm actually struggling today.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where are you calling from, just really quickly?
I'm calling from the U.S. I don't want to say my state, other than I'm not in Texas, so hopefully I can hold it together here. I was calling in so early because I was actually trying to call in last week about to thank you all for talking about the the interview about turf logic that you guys had.
Right.
You guys briefly talked about it, and there was some pushback in the comments about the video about rapid onset gender dysphoria, and something that really irked me was some commenters talked about how, oh, well, you guys need to have people from the opposite viewpoint on your show because we need to have both sides represented. Right. And I found that really annoying because
what are the sides? One that supports trans people and one that doesn't. So no, I don't want to platform people that don't support people in the trans community.
Well, yeah, it's not a debate. It's like flat Earth. I call anti-trans people the flat Earth people of biology. So I was going to talk about that, and we can if you prefer, but I'm trying not to cry right now.
I'm so sorry.
I didn't know if you guys were aware of what just happened in Texas yesterday about trans people.
Yes, the lieutenant governor's statement. Is that what you're referring to?
No, actually, Greg Abbott issued something.
Oh.
So I just found out about this in the last hour, which is why I'm kind of caught off guard. So there was a opinion by Ken Paxton, who is the Attorney General, who said in his opinion, which is completely ignorant, trans healthcare is abusive.
Yes, I apologize. That's actually what I was referring to, not the lieutenant governor, but the AG.
Yeah, so that came out, and this isn't really on my channel, but I'm actually a trans person that's in the closet. I've already transitioned, so I have some experience with this, and I just spent the last 3 months writing a 21,000 word paper on this with 150 sources that I'm making a whole series about trans people on. So I'm not an expert, I'm not a professor, but I kind of know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's both your lived experience and you've researched it a lot.
Yeah. Greg Abbott just signed a order here to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services that says, quote, consistent with our correspondence in August 2021, the Office of the Attorney General has now confirmed in the enclosed opinion that a number of so-called sex change procedures constitute child abuse under existing Texas law. because the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services is responsible for protecting children from abuse, I hereby direct your agency to conduct a prompt and thorough investigation of any reported instances of these abusive procedures in the state of Texas. I'll skip the center paragraph that's basically talking about, or part of the center paragraph, it talks about gender transitioning.
Yeah, we have it up on the screen now.
Healthy body parts, yeah.
If people want to read that.
And then the last part, it says, Texas law also imposes a duty on DFPS, the Department of Protective Family Services, to investigate the parents of a child who is subjected to these abusive gender transitioning procedures, and on other state agencies to investigate licensed facilities where such procedures may occur. So basically yesterday, Greg Abbott said that this stuff is illegal, this stuff is child abuse, and anybody who has a trans child who is trying to get gender affirming care for them is now doing something illegal, and the government is going to investigate them and I guess possibly arrest them. I don't know. And not only is that horrifying and terrifying for families and parents, but this kind of stuff kills people. I have looked up and have a couple stats from my paper, if I could just read a couple real quick.
Sure.
Since the Human Rights Campaign began recording them in 2013, murders of trans people have been steadily increasing. The 1 in 3 trans youth has been a victim of sexual violence in the past year. These are all statistics from the US. A trans individual's chance of suicide is doubled if they are rejected by their birth family. It goes up to 10.5%. Compared to cisgender individuals, trans youth have 2 to 3 times the risk of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, and self-harming. In 2021, 17 anti-LGBTQ laws were enacted. That's more than 2018, 2019, and 2020 combined. In 2018, 55% of people who sought insurance coverage for surgical procedures were denied.
Mm-hmm.
More than half of trans adolescents have self-harmed non-fatally in the past year. That was in 2019. A trans individual's chance of suicide is doubled up to 13.1% if their religious community rejects them or if they are forced into conversion therapy, quote unquote, which is really just psychological and physical abuse. So I don't know what's going to happen right now. This is exploding on the trans Twitter circles I'm a part of. But I don't know if this is appropriate. I'm not going to weigh my opinion on it on air, but people are likening this to a trans genocide in Texas right now because you can't get care. If you try to get care, you're being, you know, I guess they're going to be investigated and or arrested by the government. And I mean, I have piles of studies that show if you give these kids, and by kids, I say teenagers, you know, 13 to 18-year-olds, puberty blockers or hormones when it's appropriate, their mental health drastically improves.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever people, especially people on the right and these old white hags say, oh, you're irreversibly damaging children, I am of a very strong opinion that children cannot make decisions like this for themselves. That's why you have puberty blockers. It's a somewhat controversial treatment that's getting more acceptance in the community. That looks like the only 2 side effects right now are possible sterility and some bone density issues. But it gives a pause so that kids can take time to know what they need to do. This whole issue of, oh, we're forcing hormones on kids, we're doing sex change surgery, we're cutting off breasts and stuff. That's not how this stuff works.
Yeah.
And if anybody knew how fucking hard it is to transition, then they would know that you can't do that.
Yeah.
It was so unbelievably difficult, and I sacrificed almost everything in my life in order to transition. You cannot take a kid into a clinic and get a sex change. You cannot do it.
I know.
And these people fear monger about this.
Yeah.
And you can't, there's not even a I dare these people to find a doctor who would perform sex reassignment surgery on a child. You can't do it. These surgeries are not done until you're 18 at the least, as part of a group of medical professionals who are working together with multiple psychiatric referrals after years of hormones and lived experience as the other sex, or gender rather. And it takes work, and they treat it like, oh, well, if your kid says he's a girl, quote unquote, you can just go drug him up. And that's not how it works. And people need to understand that. And like, I don't know what good calling in will do. I was just going to call in and complain about the comments. And then I saw this, and I was going to thank you guys for talking about this issue, because normally you talk about politics, and I know the Ukraine stuff is going on, but like, this is something that's really important to me. And while I was waiting online, I read this letter, and like, I'm sick to my stomach.
I get it.
Yeah. Do you have any, we know how horrible like the outright bigots and like the, Abbott sort of Republican type folks are. Do you have any comment for the type of journalists who've been sort of just asking questions and just reporting supposedly objectively, but I think everybody kind of points out that maybe trolling and worse, like maliciously smearing the trans community? Do you have any comment on that sort of reporting and how people have been, is your perception been that people have been dishonest or irresponsible in that regard?
At this point, okay, I'm not an expert. I am not a biologist, professor of gender studies, whatever, okay? I'm a trans person. I started transitioning a couple years ago. I'm completely done. The federal government recognizes me as a female. I have spent 3 months poring over peer-reviewed research of this stuff. The jury is out. Gender is real. You can change your sex. We know what we're doing. The only controversy among people that actually know what they're doing is puberty blockers.
Yeah.
There are some concerns that you have possible effects on cognitive capability in the future, that you may have some memory issues. We're not sure yet because it's relatively new. But trans people have existed throughout history. I believe his name was Magnus Hirscher, I can't quite remember, was a German scientist, sexologist, was dealing with this stuff before World War II when his clinic was destroyed. We've been doing these surgeries and studies with chromosomes and stuff since the 60s and before. We know how this stuff works. These idiots and Matt Walshes that go out there and scream about we're destroying the world and gender and all this sort of stuff, this ideology, it's complete bullshit. If people are denying this stuff, it's no different than creationists that deny the fact that life evolves and are trying to frame this false dichotomy of creation versus evolution. I'm sorry that reality makes you upset with your fairy tale. You can believe what you want, but you don't get to make rules about it that everyone else has to live by.
Well, I mean, agreed.
That's not how it works.
I'm fearful. I mean, look, there's a glimmer of hope here with at least this letter that the experts won't conclude what Abbott is implying there. But I mean, what disturbs me most about this, and I know this is coming from a cis white woman, so just what strikes me the most about this letter is the criminalization and investigation of parents who are just trying to do right by their kid, and their kid basically saying, I don't feel this way. The parents being sympathetic, helping them transition before puberty, which would be helpful, or at least use puberty blockers. And the insinuation here is that validating your child's experience, which is necessary for their mental health and their growth as a healthy person, is criminal. And that's what's nuts about it, because more parents, honestly, should be open to this.
And it's to expand on what you just said, like the only thing you can do before puberty is a social transition. And that's the only thing the WPATH standards of care, which are one of the main international guidelines, suggests. There's a couple different ones, and one of the biggest ones is the WPATH standards of care. So it's not like you're going to be giving drugs to a prepubescent child.
Yeah.
That's not what happens. You give them puberty blockers whenever they reach, I think it's Tanner stage 2, and that pauses everything to give them time to figure out what's going on. I get so frustrated by the misinformation. And then you have people doing these word games and trying to put everything in neat little boxes. When you actually look at this stuff, it is really hard to define male and female.
Yeah.
And people don't like that idea. But there's something called Swyer syndrome, where you can actually have a biological woman, and lots of trans people don't like that term, but biological is just an adjective, meaning it's not the act of having sex, it's just a noun for sex. It's like physical sex. You have a biological woman who's born with XY chromosomes. And I found a study from just a couple years ago. There was a woman born with XY chromosomes who got pregnant twice. Not even chromosomes perfectly determine what sex you are outside.
Yeah. The biological sex, there is gray area there, but like conservatives obviously erase that.
Yeah, you have to look at more than just genitals. You have to look at more than just your chromosomes or just your secondary characteristics. So people try to have these gotcha questions, and it's like, well, how do you define man and woman? Okay, well I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, well, I'm not entirely sure. You know, I don't know. And they treat that like, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not trustworthy. Well, okay, I'm a woman. I have a vagina.
Yeah.
I have breasts. I have female hormone levels now. I'm a woman. We've seen many studies of the brain that seem to show that trans people have essentially hybrid brains. They trend toward the gender that these people experience. So at some point, we categorize them with these essentially arbitrary categories we have that are of the opposite sex. You can change sex. That's uncomfortable. That's weird in humans. Clownfish do it all the time. But these people are so set in their ways and so bigoted that if you don't have every single answer, then it's like, oh, well, you're just a crazy trans person who's pushing your ideology on kids.
Yeah.
Well, no, we know that this care cuts their suicide risk in half.
Yeah.
If we don't do this, they literally hurt and kill themselves.
Yeah.
And unless you're trans, you don't understand what that feeling is like. I think I counted and had 160 something self-harm scars from abuse and mistreatment. I am so much happier and comfortable in my skin. You don't know what it's like to just constantly think about your genitals and be so upset, and then wake up from the operating table and all the bandages and stuff are off, and then you fly home, and like a month later, you're like, oh, you know what? I haven't thought about my dick in like a week because I don't think about it anymore. It doesn't control my life anymore. So this is what it's like to be normal and just go about everyday life.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm sure Matt Walsh, I didn't even watch his show where he, debated with a non-binary person. I didn't even watch that because I'm sure he has no idea what he's talking about when he just asks gotcha questions of a non-binary person who probably doesn't know enough about how he's going to act to defend themselves.
Yeah, because what's going on there is like you say, they're acting as if they're having a biological discussion, but this is really a theological one. This is like a Christian fundamentalism thing where like they deny the existence of anything that outside of like a man and woman that the Bible might describe.
Yeah.
But of course, like as you said also, like historically this stuff is unavoidable because people do exist outside of these narrow classes. And there's a history, like just one example, there's a book called Good Wives, Nasty Wenches and Anxious Patriarchs by Kathleen Brown, and it goes into colonial Virginia, and how they realized, like, oh shoot, there are certain people that we don't know how to categorize. We need to get the state legislature involved because our entire like patriarchal society is predicated on making these determinations.
People like the settlers, or people that
the House of Burgesses that, like, you know, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson's descendants were all in, right? Like,
wow.
Like that stuff was, and it's because of patriarchy that this is so urgent. So you have these sort of like theocratic patriarch, like a sort of descendants of theocratic patriarchy that cannot, you know, see the light on this stuff, so to speak.
Well, Wendigo,
I want to be clear that.
Sorry, go on.
Okay, just one last point is, I want to be clear that you have two sexes in humans. And a lot of anti-trans people are like, oh, well, you deny sex and you deny biological reality. No, there are two sexes in humans, and gender is on a spectrum, and they're different things. Every single trans rights activist that I have engaged with, not one of them has denied that sex is a reality. It's a real thing that people have, and there are variances in it. And what's confusing is how to categorize those variances.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's helpful. I can shill myself. I've made videos about this. I have a paper written on it. I'm trying to
please
educate
do
about
shill
it,
yourself. Where are your videos?
My videos are on my channel. I'm Willow the Wendigo. I do some other non-activism stuff, but my focus is on science education. And right now I'm on part 3 of 5 of my trans educational series that's based on that 21,000 word paper. The first video is all about gender and definitions and sexuality. The second one is about history. The third one is about possible causes and brain studies. And the fourth one is already written, but I have to make it. It's a very, very long one that's all about the science of transitioning, all of these different rules, different concerns about transitioning, puberty blockers, all of this kind of stuff actually that these morons right now in Texas are screaming about would be addressed in this video. I just haven't finished it yet.
Okay, well, I just
one more part after
Bradley,
that.
I just popped her channel in the chat right here. We're just gonna put it up real quick, and then I'll hang up. If that's all right with you, Willow.
That's fine. I don't want people to think I called in like to try to get an audience. This is an important thing.
I mean, no.
Of course,
if it teaches people and I get, you know, subscribers, that's great. But like, I was just about to cry.
Look, I really appreciate you calling in, and I don't know if Willow's just your channel name or your name, but either way, again, Willow, thank you so much. And I think, you know, our audience is really great on this topic, but you've, I'm sure, taught some people some things.
Yeah, it can always be better.
It can always be better, and people should check out your channel for more on this topic. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot for letting me talk.
Of course.
Bye.
Bye. Fluid Ajaswi, absolutely amazing, inspiring caller, one of the best we have ever had. Such a calm way of explaining context and logic, and very tough not to empathize and understand. Thanks for giving her the time to go all out.
And like on a day like today too. I mean,
yeah,
it's just horrible.
CJ said, I just subscribed. Train Boy, if sex is real, then how come I haven't had it? Checkmate, transphobes. This person has written this a few times, so I'm just going to read it. Swoletariat, Emma, I appreciate your humility to take stock of changing information, your growing experience / knowledge to adapt your analysis. That said, I do think you run the risk of overcorrection. We leftists in the U.S. must remain skeptical of prevailing narratives, especially those which are blind to the realities of the American empire. Putin is a bad guy, and his interventions in Ukraine should not be supported, as some on the left seem to want to do. But Putin being bad doesn't mean that we should ignore how his behavior is related to American hegemony and NATO posturing, etc. I think I reiterated that context yesterday, but the U.S. and Russia are using Ukraine as a proxy. Both sides have used the situation to further their own interests. The response of the left and the West should be to demand that our leaders take a less aggressive posture around the globe, 100%, dismantle, not expand NATO, and end American imperialism, especially as we see that reckless American foreign policy breeds and emboldens strongmen like Putin and strengthens their domestic political power. We've seen the same story play out over and over again: Iraq, Iran, Libya, North Korea, etc. For more information, I suggest people look up John Mearshmeyer's analysis from back in 2014, which is still relevant today. Left is best. Keep up the great work. Love you all. Yeah, great points. I mean, I really don't disagree with pretty much anything that you said there. So,
and I do think like one thing that I think I also want to spend more time on is the run up to this situation, right? Not just what's going on now and how people are reacting.
Right, dismantling NATO now is not feasible.
Well, but I'm talking about like what about those regions? Like what like all these things, all these sort of like off ramps that could have been taken before we ended up to this portion. I think that's important to talk about, right?
Yeah. Again, we can deal with the news of the day and then the larger context too. And when I was recalibrating, it was more that I didn't incorporate larger context of like the intensity maybe of Putin's imperialism in regards to this. I mean, I thought
like there have been imperial victories on both sides of this, right? Like we got what we want with regards to the Nord Stream, it appears, and so like I think like I think that call for like this is not. I don't like being enlisted in a fight. This is not a fight I'm enlisted in. And like I hope that it serves into like I hope there's no violence. And if like let's say like there turns into an occupation of Ukraine that's like the occupation of Afghanistan, like yeah, we need to start seriously looking at other things. But I don't know. There's a certain level of like jingoism here that I don't quite understand what the purpose is. Like what to get the left to say certain things about Putin. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's like I think we've played with this topic ad nauseum, Matt and I. So I think you guys understand at this point where we're at. Tames Darwin, Emma, pursuant to the first phone call today, I urge listeners to find a new video on YouTube by Kaylin, sounds like Salient, Conrad, a queer Canadian YouTuber. It's the first part of a 3-part series detailing his infiltration of TERF groups on social media. It's full. It runs 5 to 6 hours. Very trenchant analysis. That sounds good. Hope you guys clip that call. Yes. A Square, Emma, that was a very, very good and timely interview with Diva Woodley. What I find, I've never heard of this. What a find. I've never heard of this guest. Her succinct points, I hope, are used by activists as they continue to fight to reform Dem Party and advance democracy. I agree. I thought she was really great. Turkish Martha Stewart. Yesterday, you guys talked about how the right wing generally has a corner on philosophy and we're wondering why, and then went on to demonstrate why by trash talking large sections of philosophy and disregarding it as abstracting things to avoid the complexities of reality. Yes.
I didn't say, I don't think that characterization is right. I think a lot of people turn to philosophy for that reason, which is why I think like I have had experience in philosophy classes at the highest levels. And like, I don't think the politics are that great of a lot of people, unless they're Marxists, frankly.
Well, he goes on to say, and I mean, look, I think I said that, which in modern day I stand by.
I'm sorry, there is a people do look to philosophy. Like this is the problem with Ayn Rand. People like look for something that explains the entire universe, so they don't need to observe the entire universe.
It's like religion,
right? Like,
yeah.
But anyway, continue this message.
Right. And it's not just you guys who have this attitude towards philosophy. Lots of the left does, which is baffling. You do know that Marx was a philosopher, right? He did his doctorate. Yeah, I did know. He did his doctoral thesis on ancient philosophy, looking at different philosophies of nature. Okay.
Yeah, someone's a little bit sensitive and not quite understanding the criticism.
It's all good.
And also, like, as one thing I like about Marx is like, I can't remember exactly the phrase, but hitherto the purpose of philosophy has been to criticize the world. The point is to change it. Kind of back to my point originally about philosophy. So I share Marx's critique of philosophy in that department.
Mopping up. While I believe what Russia is doing is wrong and that Putin is a power and valor-hungry oligarch, I do think it's rich that America has a massive stainless steel cojones to call out Russia for annexing Ukraine, but defend Israel annexing Palestine. Well, that is...
If people want more informed discussion on this, American Prestige is doing good up-to-the-date stuff. I don't think their perspective is very different than ours, but it is, those guys are, you know, experts in the field.
They're experts, right. We cover a bunch of things. Train boy, please don't insult fat earthers by equating us with TERFs. Yeah, and Steely Danarchy says, hey, clip this call. Yes, we should do that. All right, let's get into some clips. Okay, let's start with this Tucker thing, I think. Tucker Carlson continuously demonstrates his inability to empathize with people. Here he is talking about Vladimir Putin, asking rhetorical questions about why Putin is hated, because he believes that you're only able to disagree with somebody or find them objectionable or odious if they have done something harmful to you. That's quite useful for conservatives. I will say I find Tucker Carlson odious. He has never, not yet, personally done anything to me, but we'll see what his analysis is about Vladimir Putin.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Since the day that Donald Trump became president, Democrats in Washington have told you have a patriotic duty to hate Vladimir Putin. It's not a suggestion, it's a mandate. Anything less than hatred for Putin is treason. Many Americans
Wait, can we pause that for a second? I don't hate Putin more than I hate, like, leaders of this country. I think he's bad. I haven't been tried for treason yet. Just saying. I don't know. Maybe that prosecution is somewhere in
pending.
It's in the same legal judicial system that Jordan Peterson's prosecution for his courageous stance against trans Marxism, language dictates.
Or how about it's in the same department as the lost files for where Tucker's being investigated by the NSA.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's just like they had a flood or something. Keep going.
Dutifully hate Vladimir Putin. Maybe you're one of them. Hating Putin has become the central purpose of America's foreign policy. It's the main thing that we talk about. Entire cable channels are now devoted to it. Very soon, that hatred of Vladimir Putin could bring the United States into a conflict in Eastern Europe.
Nope.
Before that happens, it might be worth asking
Pause it again, sorry. It's the MSNBC stuff and not like the agitating for preemptive sanctions by members of the party that you're in the bag for anyway.
Right. It's just like indistinguishable from Glenn Greenwald at this point. But yeah, it's just like, and also he only pretends to be anti-war when it's convenient, and he's completely ignoring the fact that, for example, Biden has said we're not going to involve U.S. troops. That could change, and that would be worthy of immense criticism. But you're not going to get credit when you do it for complete dove Tucker Carlson.
Pretty serious. What is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Has he shipped every middle-class job in my town to Russia? Did he manufacture a worldwide pandemic that wrecked my business
there you
and kept
go.
me indoors for 2 years? Is he teaching my children to embrace racial discrimination? Is he making fentanyl? Is he trying to snuff out Christianity? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that. So why does permanent Washington hate him so much? If you've been watching the news, you know that Putin is having a border dispute with a nation called Ukraine. Now, the main thing to know about Ukraine, for our purposes, is that its leaders once sent millions of dollars to Joe Biden's family. Not surprisingly, Ukraine is now one of Biden's favorite countries. Biden has pledged to defend Ukraine's borders even as he opens our borders to the world. That's how it works. Invading America is called equity. Invading Ukraine is a war crime. So with every day, we move closer to some kind of conflict with Russia, conflict that could easily spin out of control, given that the people running this have no fine motor skills. The administration assures us this has nothing at all to do with repaying Joe Biden's personal debts to Ukrainian oligarchs. Not at all. It's completely and totally unrelated.
What?
The point here is to defend democracy. Not that Ukraine is a democracy. It is not a democracy. Ukraine's president has arrested his main political opponent. He has shut down newspapers and television stations that have dared to criticize him. So in American terms, you would call Ukraine a tyranny. But Joe Biden likes Ukraine, so Putin bad, war good.
Okay. I'm trying not to go here, but it's hard for me not to. The complete disconnect from reality about Biden's actual position in this conflict, which has been sanctions and a promise not to involve troops, is just not reflected in Tucker's monologue, and is also everything that we're hearing from like the Greenwald types on Twitter, or the Tracy types, or the Mate types. This is exactly the same kind of stuff. There's no context that's imbued. And it's just interesting to me that it works hand in hand.
Because all those people are avoidant of criticizing the Republican Party.
Well, right. It's a way to critique Democrats.
Make it about MSNBC as opposed to legislators. I mean, I think
as opposed to like the Republicans who want preemptive sanctions. I mean, it's not like he's making a standard Republican critique there. Biden's weak or whatever. No, he's saying Biden is hating Putin irrationally, as are the MSNBC Democrats, and he has debts to Ukraine because of Hunter Biden. Like maybe the only vaguely interesting kernel there, although that has nothing to do with this, in my opinion. That's just like standard corruption from politicians and their children and nepotism. And then, of course, he goes on to just hint at a smorgasbord of racist tropes. Does he eat dogs? So if you're Chinese, that's who you hate. Like the idea that people who go on his show and say this guy's anti-war because they'll watch this monologue and like, oh, of course.
They're misleading people.
They're liars because this guy is thrilled by the idea of drumming up racial resentment towards Chinese people. And just listen to it right there.
Yeah.
Like listen to it right there.
This is the form of the supposed anti-war message, but in the exact same sentence, in the same breath, he's saying we should actually just hate China, right? Which is the Republican Party initiative right now. That's what their focus is on. In addition to preemptive sanctions, which again, and
that's not even his critique. Like that's not even his critique. Right. I mean, then start a third party, Tucker. If you're really this impassioned about it, because the people in your party are the ones that are drumming up more conflict consistently. The Republican Party is more pro-war. That is the reality. And yes, it's more widespread than I would like, but I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with how Biden has approached this. But then he basically like makes these roundabout arguments about because he's opened our borders that a hostile invasion of another country is basically you're a hypocrite. So
and how did we close our borders using a bullshit COVID justification with Title 42, which again,
is he going to mention that?
I haven't seen. I'd love to see Michael Tracy, the so-called person who's on this COVID authoritarianism beat, mention that on Tucker. But I think Michael and Glenn, frankly, like the border being closed. If they didn't, they would act differently. That's my supposition. But maybe they're trying not to step on any of Tucker's toes, or his bow ties, or whatever.
Don't step on the bow ties. Don't step in the woodshed. It's never used. It's pristine. And another thing, sorry, because we talked about this Portland shooter who's radicalized by the far right. Like, Bradley, do you think we can just go back to the one part where he lists all of the things and groups them all together? The eating of the dogs, the critical race theory, the fentanyl. Like, this is all you ever need to see from this dude to understand exactly the kind of like, when you add all of these things together, you multiply the aggrievement and the anger. And it also diversifies the right wing's targets. So you don't just hate this one group, you get to hate a bunch of people. And you're the special one.
But even the closest thing he gets to over the critique of capitalism here is the people who sent your jobs overseas, which again, like he
makes it about China
or policymakers, right? As opposed to the capitalists who are seeking the capitalist system, which is always going to seek cheapest profit or cheapest labor.
Yeah.
Many Americans have obeyed this directive. They now dutifully hate Vladimir Putin. Maybe you're one of them. Hating Putin has become the central purpose of America's foreign policy. It's the main thing that we talk about. Entire cable channels are now devoted to it. Very soon, that hatred of Vladimir Putin could bring the United States into a conflict in Eastern Europe. Before that happens, it might be worth asking yourself, since it is getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Has he shipped every middle-class job in my town to Russia? Did he manufacture a worldwide pandemic that wrecked my business and kept me indoors for 2 years? Is he teaching my children to embrace racial discrimination? Is he making fentanyl? Is he trying to snuff out Christianity? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions.
All right, good. All right, I think I got it all. People that Tucker says you're supposed to hate. If you get called a racist by somebody, they're the people that you actually should hate. If someone fires you because you said something racist.
No, he said tried to get somebody fired.
Oh, tried to get
so
somebody
it wasn't
fired.
the boss. It was the person who called your boss.
I only had time to write down get fired. Someone who ships your jobs overseas. All right, like if you want to make a critique of capitalism, as Matt said, we can talk about that.
I think it's more about, let's blame it all on Hillary Clinton.
And then we get into like the grouping of Chinese people. Manufacturing a pandemic. He went further even there than he had before. Critical race theory. That's just, why don't you hate black people in teachers unions? Fentanyl. I don't know. That's like a fairly neutral one, I would guess. It's people who are trying to snuff out Christianity. So Muslim people, probably. Or the amorphous globalist.
Yeah, and the easier answer is just that I have is capitalists and the politicians that they own.
That's not what he's interested in. God, he's a really bad person.
Yeah, I think
I hate you, Tucker. I mean,
and yeah, I think people can MSNBC criticism is great and all that stuff, but I think continuing to go on this guy's show is despicable, and there has to be some sort of like win for people who care about supposed like anti-war issues, and I don't see it anywhere. This is like, if this is the influence that Glenn Greenwald has on Tucker, which is to make him we're hating Putin and not the Chinese people because they're eating dogs, like great success there, great influence.
A Majority Report wardrobe coordinator, more stochastic terrorism from Tucker Carlson. Your neighbor who thinks differently is your real enemy. Yep.
Your Chinese people. Yep.
That too. Yeah. Pollyanna, please add me to the list with Willow of people who are way over, quote, being patient with ignorant individuals. I will add you to my running list. Mopping up. Of course, Tucker is sympathetic to Zelensky's jailed political opponent. He's a neo-Nazi. North Dakota Llama. I don't know much on the subject, but question for Matt. Do you believe that incremental change will suffice in order to reach your ideal state, or do you think large-scale revolutionary action is needed to achieve it?
I think fundamentally, just viewing history, that there will be some confrontation with property owners at some point. Yeah, I'm skeptical, but I do think like the avenues of democratic change should be completely exhausted, and I think basically my view of that sort of thing is that it's always been perverted through things like gerrymandering and the Electoral College that we've talked to, and that stuff is necessary. And even if you push far enough, you'll have people start shooting to maintain their property. And I think the best case scenario that I have would be you push really hard on all these sorts of parliamentary avenues and get movements going, and then expect a sort of assault and beat that assault, and then you have socialism.
Dear Matt, I'm not reading this. Never mind. It's just like there's so much criticism. This was like,
what's the topic?
All right. Dear Matt, you don't need to be on edge when any IMer talks any critical feedback or different opinions. Sometimes just reading and sharing is good enough. Why don't you go on a rant defending your stance whether an IM remotely gives it? Why don't you just go on a rant defending your stance whenever an IM remotely gives a different opinion? It's nauseating.
Oh, so it wasn't about anything. It's just a general critique. Well,
wow, Matt.
I think that's more my thing, right? Matt's pretty even keeled.
Yeah.
I feel like there's literally maybe not anybody I know who's more even keeled, actually.
Yeah, and also I'm just right a lot of times. I don't want people to miss that part.
Yeah, that's right and even keeled. All right, that's like the IMs hate us today. Or actually not so much as the other 2 days. Formerly dysphoria guy. Emma and crew, serious note for once. I am a cishet man who feared for years I had an exciting form of hormonal syndrome known as Klinefelter's. Upon turning 18, I got a breast reduction, so I wasn't a vaguely chubby kid with oversized breasts. I go months without remembering it. And when I do, it's always positive. Wore hoodies all through the hot weather because I was tired of being harassed. That's really That's really sweet. And I'm glad that happened, that you were able to have access to that.
You know, the Kleinfelters thing, like that just reminds me of, you know, my, like before all of this sort of like anti-trans culture. I mean, it absolutely was just part of the culture before that, right? But like, yes, of course, people that didn't perfectly fit a gender binary existed in any community that you lived in, right? Like, and people knew that sort of thing, and we just didn't have like a good way to accept those people into like culture. But yeah, the idea, I mean, there are literally people that think this is all just made up, and that is fucking insane to me.
Insane.
Like, how did you not come across folks like this? It's scary.
Calling from an 817 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Emma and Matt and crew. This is Tony from Texas. How are y'all doing?
Tony from Texas, doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well, all things considered, I guess. I first want to express my profound appreciation for Will calling in. That first call was incredible. And I definitely am all up in those fields as a trans woman living in Texas, born and raised here. You know, it's these kind of attitudes that even though I'm blessed to have a very supportive family, like my parents and my siblings and some of my cousins are very accepting of you know, who I am. It still took me well into my adulthood to really embrace that myself and come out of the closet. So you know, it's definitely a part of my work as an artist and as an activist to help provide that support and that community for others, especially, you know, to kind of change those cultural attitudes so that folks don't have to wait until they're well into their 20s or 30s before really embracing who they are. So I really appreciate y'all giving that time and that space for that discussion. And I also want to shout out Bender's latest episode of Doomed that was on last night regarding the shooting in Portland. If y'all haven't checked that out yet, please go do so.
Please do.
I know some folks were IMing about that yesterday.
All right.
And then I'm also the artist that did the animated portion of the intro for Scam Economy. So if y'all haven't checked out Scam Economy yet, go do that.
No way. And, it looks cool. It looks cool. So good job.
Appreciate it. You know, I was just working off of the concept art that Bender had somebody else do for him. So, you know, it was a very collaborative effort to make that all come together. But I was really honored and blessed to get to do a little bit of that contributing to that. So thank you guys so much for all the work you do. If y'all aren't patrons of Matt Bender and Left Reckoning, please go do that. If you're not a member of the Majority Report, please go do that as well if you can afford it. Thanks so much for all of y'all's hard work, and keep it up.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye.
Do you want to take a crack at this new Blake Masters ad?
Well, I'm going in cold. So
am I, actually, kind of.
Okay. So we could, I mean, honestly, we could incorporate some sort of segment on the show where we go into clips cold, but maybe that's not a good idea.
Let's see. Ice cold teal plants. I don't know.
So Blake Masters is like the
chief operating officer or something of Teal Capital.
Yeah. He's just kind of like what's the secondary test after is beta test second?
That's a good question for these sorts of nerds.
Okay, well, I wish I knew, but he's whatever the 2.0 for Peter Thiel in terms of a candidate running for public office.
JD Vance looks like he's getting washed.
Yeah, flat at like 5%.
Yeah, I mean, and really the reason for that is because he tried to ride both horses and criticize Trump earlier on, and now he's supposedly like the number one Trump guy
having Marjorie Taylor Greene rally with him. Just like, you got to pick a lane, bro. But he picked wrong.
I don't think Blake Masters was commenting on. He's too busy I don't know, moving money to Palantir to spy on people or something. I'm not sure what his day-to-days were with Teal Capital, but anyway, here is the new. He's running in Arizona.
But did you guys ever read the Animorphs books?
Yeah.
He's like third on the evolutionary chart of Musk. He's like in the middle.
Yeah.
He's like an NPC. Basically.
Right. He's in the middle of the transition. Those books are sick.
America isn't just an idea. We're a country. We're a people with a history and a culture. This is the home of Davy Crockett, and Daniel Boone, of Mark Twain and Ernest Hemingway, of Norman Rockwell and Chuck Berry. Or how about... I can hear the screeching already. That list isn't diverse enough. That's all these people can talk about. But when's the last time you heard NPR talk about American greatness? When's the last time you heard a leftist say anything good?
That's regularly on NPR.
So hold on. Did he bleep out himself as some sort of censorship thing?
Oh, I don't think he meant himself. I think he probably would have named like Philip Roth or something like that.
Right. Okay. But just so he's trying to make some point about like the canceled culture heroes.
Yeah, what he said was Gary Glitter. You can't listen to Gary Glitter anymore.
Oh, the horror.
Let's play a little bit more.
No more Bill Cosby for you.
And I just want to say, like, America has lots of different cultures. It's not a culture. Like, it has a whole bunch
No, it's
of
a culture.
Cultures, regional cultures, various different populations, like not a people, but many different sorts of people. And those things are all rightly described by leftists as dog whistles for nationalists and fascists, in my opinion. Anyway, you can continue, Brad.
At all about our people. They don't do it. If it were up to them, we wouldn't even exist. That's why they're obsessed with tearing down
Venture
statues.
capital people?
I'm Blake Masters. I'm running for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, and I approve this message because I am proud to be an American.
Whoa. So we're one culture, like as you're saying that, right? How is that possible? I would be interested to talk to people in different regions of the country. I don't know, maybe some people that like to fly Confederate flags, if they feel that the United States is one culture. Well, no, I mean, but it serves a dual purpose for someone like Masters because it should be one culture. We should erase the cultures of others and fall under like this one dominant hegemonic culture, and that is one of white people.
America's definitely been too tolerant of certain cultures, like Confederate culture. We should have, frankly, like instead of colonizing the rest of American land, we should have colonized the South after the Civil War with like money and government institutions and support for workers and black folks and for freedmen, basically.
Yeah.
And freed slaves. Yeah, I'm trying to look though, because Blake Masters also looks to be having a bit of a problem with. So he said that Trump. He did release a ad that said he thinks Trump won the election. This was in November.
Oh, sure.
But I don't think he was. The video would have been enough if Masters believed what he was saying, but the rest of the video, very ad suggests he doesn't. Right after his profession of faith, Masters changes the subject. Rather than echoing theories of stolen votes or hacked machines, Masters contends Trump would have won if mail-in voting hadn't been expanded and social media platforms hadn't censored damaging stories about then candidate Joe Biden. So it's interesting. He was playing a little bit of like the.
He's riding the fence.
Yeah, he's riding the fence.
Well,
like,
I mean, and that,
these guys.
It's not like that. Never like that playbook hasn't been successful for another Peter Thiel candidate. Oh wait. But you know what I like about that too is like clearly Blake Masters doesn't believe that Trump won the election.
Not.
Absolutely not. So it's kind of like when it's been rainy here and like there's just like you have to cross a puddle, but you like know your foot's gonna get wet regardless, and there's no way. So you just kind of try and fail to just skirt the tip of your shoe on the top of the puddle. Like you're gonna get wet, but you got to cross it anyway.
Cross at the lowest point. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what he's attempting to do here, if that makes sense.
I wonder what he's pulling now, because I mean, maybe we need to focus more on Masters. Vance has just been so annoying because he had that book that
that liberals loved.
Yeah, but He doesn't seem to be doing anything. And it's also, I appreciate the Republican Party not getting out of the way for these teal frauds that don't even believe that Trump won the election. Like, you can't let these guys phony their way. You got to get the people that actually believe that Trump rightfully won the election, that the vote totals are lies. And these half measures for these Silicon Valley aliens don't work.
Nope.
Also, Masters does all of his ads in one location.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, did he shoot those out?
It's got to be like at the border, right?
Just like a tumbleweed in the background, a little cactus.
Yeah.
Blake, I'll give
Very
you a tip
authentic.
for free.
He's trying to, that's when he says one culture, he's trying to like go after people coming across the border. That's what it is.
He's one of those podcasts that like goes up to a vacation rental and records all their episodes. I'm thinking of one in particular for like the next like
text it to us.
For like 3 months and just records them all in one go.
There's a I just have I'm trying to think of who I hate more. Like, I have a particular resentment for JD Vance just because, like, in the wake of the 2016 election, you know, I was like starting to work in this field, and certain family members of mine were like, you have to read this book. It's really the voice of the rural Trump voter. I'm like, you're from New York City.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it looks like here's some polling. This is from Feb 6th through 8th. Leading the poll for Arizona Senate race Republican primary, Mark Brnovich with 22%. That's a solid 22%.
Who is the Arizona Attorney General, by the way.
Okay.
And so Blake is second with 12%. Jim Lehman has 8%, and Michael McGuire has 3%. There's 44 whole undecided. So let's make sure they decide on the real guy who is supporting of Trump's. You got to support Mr. Trump all the way.
All the way.
And I don't like the way that these Peter Thiel guys are, half in, half out.
Rittenhouse.
Sure.
Kyle Rittenhouse is launching his own media project, a media accountability project. If you recall, he basically said, I'm not political. He talked about how he's not partisan. He loves everybody.
He's just a Steven Crowder fan, but he's not political.
I mean, he's going to get so laid from that Steven Crowder appearance. And with this media accountability project, all the girls from every walk of life, from each side of the aisle, are going to come over. And the reality is like, honestly, this is just something that fascists and right-wingers reflexively do to sanitize their odious positions. They pretend that it's not political.
I just want to jump in real quick and say that we hear a lot of the solemn concern from folks with Substacks about how if you attack Tucker's free speech, you might not like Tucker, but the implications of these things are wider. I'll say a lot of those people jumped in both feet and wanted to be seen celebrating Kyle Rittenhouse getting off of charges, which I thought was interesting. And I lost track of my train of thought.
Well, just that there's an overlap between the two.
Yeah, I mean, there's an overlap. But
the Venn diagrams.
Maybe I'll remember when we play this stuff.
Okay, yeah. Well, first, just brace yourself. Kyle Rittenhouse is about to be on your screen.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes. So what I was going to say is, sorry, all those people are going to support Kyle Rittenhouse if he presses charges against any media organization that supposedly misrepresented him, a guy who decided to take a gun to attack a Black Lives Matter protest.
Yep.
So the question is, after a full year of watching these people lie in order to imprison a kid for the rest of his life, who's going to hold the liars accountable? Kyle Rittenhouse, understandably, has thought a lot about this. He joins us tonight to explain his plan going forward. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on tonight. I can't think of many people who've been at the receiving end of this much sinister lying from so-called news organizations as you have. How are you going to respond?
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Me and my team have decided to launch the Media Accountability Project as a tool to help fundraise and hold the media accountable for the lies they said and deal with them in court.
Interesting. So the idea is
to sue people for
maybe like the Covington Catholic kids.
Oh.
You will be suing news organizations that maliciously lie about people who are in the news? Is that the plan?
Yes, sir. We're going to be holding them accountable, Tucker.
Suing them.
Do you? I mean, I guess I have to ask a kind of a dumb question, but why isn't there a group like this that exists already? Since the media so often are not observers, they're players, they're participants in the news.
You're talking about yourself.
Why hasn't someone done this before?
That's a good question, Tucker, and I'm not sure,
just a dumb
to be honest,
kid that
but
killed somebody, and I don't
want to see anybody else have to deal with what I went through. So I want to hold them accountable for what they did to me, because I don't want to see anybody have to go through what I went through.
Murderers'
They tried to imprison you for the rest of your life. It wasn't coverage; it was advocacy. You have a lot of potential targets to sue yourself. Will you be suing any of these news organizations, and if so, when?
And can we support you with that?
Well, right now we're looking at quite a few politicians, celebrities, athletes. Whoopi Goldberg's on the list. She called me a murderer after I was acquitted by a jury of my peers. She went on to still say that. And there's others. Don't forget about Sank from the Young Turks. He called me a murderer before. He continues to call me a murderer.
I think
interesting. And what about the people who called you groundlessly a white supremacist, which makes it pretty hard to get a job for the rest of your life if you're a white supremacist? Will you be responding to them?
Absolutely. We are going to hold everybody who's lied about me accountable, such as everybody who's lied, called me a white supremacist.
Yeah.
They're all going to be held accountable,
I still think he's a
we're
white
going to handle them in a courtroom.
I think he is.
Kyle Rittenhouse, I appreciate you announcing that tonight, the Media Accountability Project, and of course, we're rooting for justice as we always are. So thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you, Tucker. And if anybody wants to help join us in this battle, they can donate at tmap.org.
Wow.
Thanks a lot.
You know, I was not expecting the name drop of Sink. Jink. Oh, that's pretty great.
But the important point that I just want to underline, all these folks, the free speech folks that were also in the Kyle Rittenhouse, celebration committee, they will support this.
Yep.
Maybe some of them on the edges will see that it's untenable, but a lot of them will support this, or they will shut up about it and not say shit about it.
Yep.
That there is frankly a super PAC for libel laws or libel legislation to go after news organizations for what? Calling a kid who took a gun and killed somebody at a Black Lives Matter rally a white supremacist. I'm sorry, I don't care what a judge of your peers or so-called thing. I don't respect that process. Like, who gives a shit? People can have their opinions.
Right. I think it's fair to call someone a murderer when he murdered somebody.
Yeah, I mean, like by American justice system, not a murderer. I'm happy to stipulate that. But in my eyes, he's a murderer, and he's a anti-black white supremacist murderer. Like, I don't know why you go to a Black Lives Matter protest with a gun and then just shoot people like that. And
kill buddy, which results in a killing. So I'll call you a killer. You're a killer.
I also think I think Steven Crowder is also like a white supremacist, and so like if Steven Crowder also wants to sue me, if we're just like suing about speech now, it's interesting the way the free speech has gone.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way for him to win this stuff. Like, his team just sees it as his next grift in order to fundraise for some money.
There's a myth that the Covington kids got completely made by this, but I think like you look at the numbers on that, and it's not really as grand as what the victory is they like to suggest. I mean, I'm sure it's nice for them to have money after getting in the face of people in DC, but
I also do like Tucker's, maybe this is a stupid question, and I thought he might just be like, isn't it their free speech? For a moment, I thought he might challenge him, but of course not. Of course, free speech warrior Tucker Carlson has Rittenhouse on to talk about how he's going to sue people for news coverage about him.
No, they like to talk about free speech because it sets the it sort of tills the land for when they suppress the speech of the left. Basically say you have it coming.
Yeah, and it also protects them to a degree because it like creates a media blitz in terms of holding people accountable and normalizes fascism. That's always what it is. It depoliticizes fascism and normalizes it.
I would say killing people on camera because you decided you needed to take a gun to a protest, it might help. hurt the jobs too. And what people say about that, I think, is secondary to that fact.
Madman Sam, are you kidding me? If there's one great defining feature that America historically prided itself on, it's being multicultural and multiracial country. Yeah, but not for those kinds of people. They don't think that. Dank Uger, also say my namesake's name right, Kyle. Don't be like Joe Manchin. I know, that's what I was thinking of. I love that like 30-minute interview where he called Jank Sink, I think, like 40 separate times. Maxino Oakland, matches subtly reference Cumtown. I don't listen to that show, so honestly I might, but like the name like is really off-putting to me.
It's hard to recommend.
Yeah. But I've heard good things. Matt's bong, maybe from you. I don't know. Putin's what?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay. Putin's tiger did eat a domestic dog in China, so should I hate Putin? Question mark.
Yeah, I guess it's okay.
By the transit property.
Evidence Putin eats dogs. Oh shit, I guess we can hate Putin now.
Yeah. And Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. I don't hate you. I think you guys are great. Awesome. And sister wife, Matt is great. I rely on him for informed opinions on a variety of issues.
Thank you.
There you go. Calling from a 510 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Emma, it's Kenny from Berkeley. How you doing?
Kenny from Berkeley. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. I'm here for one of Matt's stellar opinions, actually.
Ah.
So I was watching Left Reckoning. Shout out Left Reckoning. Y'all should watch tonight. And in last week's, I think it was last week's episode, you were doing a breakdown of one of Lenin's works, I believe. And I'll be honest, I haven't got through the full hour yet, but I'm working my way through it. And my question is, I've always been fine with Marxism. I consider myself more of a progressive than I do a Marxist, but Marxism makes a lot of sense to me on its face. But I struggle to get over the hump to Leninism, because to me, I struggle with the idea of a vanguard and the idea of what I see as an elitist group that says, so long as we just educate the people in Marxism, then all will be good once we have control and power. But I think that's a little misguided and misinformed, and I want to hear your take.
Yeah, this Lenin reading was a little bit older, so I'm not super fresh on even which text that we went over. But to your general point, I think like that's why Marxists and people like I don't call myself a Marxist-Leninist, although I think Lenin has a lot of informative and interesting writing. But emphasize the need to have a close relationship between whatever you're doing in the sort of parliamentary vanguard and social movements in general. Like Leo Panich and Sam Ginnan are all about this sort of thing now. So I think that's like, and I'm not a Lenin expert by any means. David's more up to date on the Lenin stuff, but I would say like that's to your concerns. I think that's like how you speak to him.
Okay. Well, I appreciate them. Thanks. And yeah, the callers definitely don't hate you.
Oh, that's nice.
Love you guys. Keep
Thanks,
up the good
Kenny.
work.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too. Colin from Nebraska says, Cumtown Batman characters bit on YouTube is fantastic. Dr. Jackson Hinkelson, PhD says, Manchin kept calling Janks. Yes, that's what it was. Any recommendations, Bradley?
Did we didn't play the Jordan Peterson song, did we?
We did.
Oh, we sure did.
Oh, right. That's right.
We did. It was difficult to get through.
Oh, yeah. We watched a lot of it.
We could do the Julia tweet, too. But maybe not.
Or the Phil Mickelson clip?
Okay. Yeah.
Rory McIlroy.
Do we have that quote from Phil Mickelson?
Yeah, we have
too?
the quote.
Okay,
too.
great. Because the quote
right.
is really, I mean.
So Phil Mickelson was promoting, he was, one of the greatest golfers of all time. I don't really follow golf that much, although.
Yeah, he was like a guy who was always up there with like Tiger Woods, basically.
Yeah.
Like he's a guy who got to take second place to Tiger when he was on his game.
Right.
And my dad follows golf really closely, and so do I as a result. But like Mickelson's also like a famous degenerate gambler and a tax cheat. So he's just kind of a seedy figure besides being a fantastic golfer.
He really looks like every Wall Street dude that you're going to pass in New York City. And another seemingly his latest way to make money is I did not even realize that. So this is the PGA partnering with Saudi Arabia. He's promoting some tour in Saudi Arabia, and Rory McIlroy, who's another very good golfer, responded to this publicly, and it was pretty jarring.
Yeah, let me just read the quote.
Okay, first let's read the quote. Yeah.
So this is the quote from Mickelson, which is just an all-timer. We know they killed Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi and have a horrible record on human rights. They execute people over there for being gay, he said. Knowing all of this, why would I even consider it? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape how the PGA Tour operates.
Oh, priorities. Wait, so, okay, how is it even a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? What, Saudi Arabia wants to expand into rich people sports, and so they're doing a partnership with the PGA?
And how they operate.
And you're going to get paid.
I want to change how they operate, and that means working with brutal dictatorships.
Working with and not critiquing.
Yeah, so basically it was an idea for like a super league, like a golf super league similar to that of like the soccer super league idea that was super pilloried. And Phil Mickelson's justification was basically like, oh, we're going to disrupt golf.
Oh, man,
but no
spicy.
one gives a shit. Like the soccer super league team, you have super league thing, you have teams involved.
Yeah, well,
how do you super league a golf tournament? Played in Saudi? Like,
isn't that just what the tours are?
Yeah, like I thought that like there's no teams to like.
All right, let's watch the Rory McIlroy response, and then we can break it down. So this is just by like one of his peers, also one of the top golfers in the world.
Yeah, why? The Koch brothers going to build the gas infrastructure for Hitler. I mean, like, why am I working with Hitler? Because it's a once in the chance lifetime to change the way gas gets to Hitler and Stalin.
What did you make of Phil's comments earlier in the week?
I don't want to kick someone while he's down, obviously, but I thought they were naive, selfish, egotistical, ignorant. A lot of words to describe that interaction he had with Shipnuck. It was just very surprising and disappointing, sad. And I'm sure he's sitting at home sort of rethinking his position and where he goes from here.
That's pretty tough. Naive, selfish, egotistical, ignorant, very surprising, disappointing, sad. I like you know what I find funny to listen to are like these Irish or British people who have not lived in their country for that long of a time. So it's this just like transatlantic thing. That's what he has going on there.
It's funny to call a 51-year-old man childish.
Damn.
But it's true. I mean, I don't know how, like that quote is just amazing because it's like, it's such a mix of standard athlete, like post-game press conference blather.
Stoicism.
And just like geopolitics.
Yeah, we gave it 110%. We just came up short.
Hopefully they don't like chop us up in a consulate somewhere.
Left it all out there.
And
guys.
If I was gay, I wouldn't have been able to participate. And alrighty. And like, by the way, lots of profiling of Enes Freedom, because of his bold stance against LeBron James and other athletes for like not openly talking about the relationship between the NBA and China. Not so much on right-wing media about golf's relationship with Saudi Arabia.
Right. Man, there was a piece in Forbes yesterday. Cantor Freedom's NBA ouster is parallels to NFL's apparent Kaepernick boycott. And I just think like this, just on the one hand, Cantor Freedom was averaging just 3.7 points and 4.6 rebounds this season. If you're averaging more rebounds than points, like that,
that's the only thing he ever did well.
Like, it's not like you're a defensive minded guy too. Like the whole thing is like you're a score first power forward, and you're averaging 3.7 points and 4.6 rebounds. Hardly statistics that would guarantee him an NBA roster spot. That's saying it, putting it lightly. On the other hand, Cantor Freedom was the 3rd overall pick in the 2011 NBA draft, and served as one of the game's top rebounders and better field goal percentage for nearly a decade. Like, should we just have a legacy roster spot for guys who like were drafted high and didn't suck like in the prime?
Where's what's his name? The guy that was it Anthony Edwards?
Anthony Bennett.
Anthony Bennett. Yeah, not Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, he was drafted after Cantor too. So where's his roster spot?
I mean, clearly Mario.
Before
Hezonja,
you mean? Before he was 1st overall, Bennett.
Right. Yeah, Anthony Bennett.
But in 2013.
Oh yeah.
Not 2011.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, he's canceled. Maybe Anthony Bennett has super like strong views about like BDS and.
But I just want to correct it. Illuminati Kid says, I don't think the Saudi Tour is PGA affiliated. It's like a competitor XFL style. Okay, so
interesting.
So that is interesting. So Mickelson's being courted like the way Adam Schefter's currently being courted to work for a sports book, because he already works on behalf of agents anyway.
That makes his quote even more hard to understand though, because he says this is a chance to change how the PGA Tour operates.
I don't know how the golf tours work. Like the tours are individual separate things.
It's probably like made by PGT Beauregard.
I do bet on the Masters, though. I will say that. And I also like watching because my boyfriend and I are in this pretty high stakes fantasy football league. And based on how you finish, you get to pick a golfer in the Masters, and how they finish determines your draft order for the next year. That's kind of fun, right?
Intricate.
All right. That's pretty intricate. Yeah.
Goldberg of fantasy sports.
Drewish, Kyle Rittenhouse is a murderer and a white supremacist. Come at me, bro. Rob from Dedham, as a diehard Celtics fan, Cantor is literally the worst basketball player I've ever seen. And I saw Michael Olowokandi play.
I mean, like, the thing is, the Cantor on the Thunder could like give you. I mean, the problem is like his game just. He's like LaMarcus Aldridge, but with worse defense, right? Like he can hit a mid-range jumper for you, but that's not important.
Right.
You can make your own shot.
District Jaboni, looks like Texas thinks parents know what is best for their kids unless they have a trans child they are trying to get care for. In that case, the state needs to step in on your medical decisions. Gross. Yeah, I mean that's a great. I tried to make that point earlier. You made it better than me.
I mean, people overuse like the 1984 stuff entirely. And probably it's more similar to the way spying on folks in the Eastern Bloc was portrayed in Milan Kundera's Unbearable Lightness of Being. But like this is like dystopian. What the state is doing with regards to the abortion stuff, the abortion vigilantes, and the this sort of anti-trans shit is, I mean, it's we're gonna see what you can do with like state power to pursue fascist ends.
All right, let's take one more call. 308. I think I knew who this is. Kowalski, bye-bye. Oh wait, no, you're there.
Yeah, my bad. I thought I called in late enough to avoid actually getting my call through.
Okay, you want me to hang up on you so you can listen to the show?
Yes.
All right, we'll give another caller another opportunity. Bye, Kowalski.
Good.
Yes, good. It is good. He hung up. All right. The final call of the day, calling from a 712 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Emma. This is Mark from Columbus, Ohio calling.
Mark from Columbus, Ohio. How are you?
Yeah. So I wanted to maybe draw some parallels with the trucker rally junk that's going on lately as a way for how the right amplifies their voice through material wealth.
Okay. Oh, we didn't get to that. All right. Yes, keep going. Just keep it a little quick because I do want to get to a trucker clip after this.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the way that I see it is that like this trucker rally has a pretty minimal number of followers that are going to it, but they're able to use an object that's got a pretty large volume of space to kind of amplify their presence. And it's just kind of one of the ways that the right does this. Like another way is through looking at like electoral college maps on like a per county basis. Oh, look at how red the map is. That's how conservative America is. But really, it's not, because it's the individual people that matter. One person, one voice. So they use these ways to amplify their presence. And maybe one more parallel that I would draw would be with the right amplifying their voices through money as speech through the Supreme Court, and how that allows the right with people like the Koch brothers to, just dump money into speech. And even though their views are reprehensible and pretty small base that would actually agree with them.
Yeah, that's all good points. All right, well, I appreciate the calls. Thanks so much. Have a good one. We're going to get to one of the moneyed people with this trucker convoy. Let's do that now, actually, because, hold on, let me find it on the sound sheet quickly, Bradley. Which one is it? 17? Okay, so we on the show the other day highlighted this U.S. trucker convoy leader. He's the chief organizer that really wants to bring the Canadian trucker convoy demonstrations to the United States. He said that it's going to be this massive convoy that goes to DC and strangles the city like a boa constrictor. Now, for people who might have forgotten or didn't see the show when we talked about this, this guy is the owner of a trucking company. This is not a regular trucker who has to work for a boss. This guy owns his own business.
Right. Like, and I think look, there is, I think, use in getting into the, the actual class and material details of the stuff. So there is things where, people do take out a huge loan for their trucks. And I think you could look at this in the same thing as people taking out student loans, right? So I think there is a worthwhile discussion to be had there. But this is an example of what the people who like to emphasize that are trying to obscure, because a lot of these folks are just owners of businesses.
Right. Including this individual here who is, I guess today was the day for them to go down to DC. So let's just take a look at the sheer size of the convoy headed down from Pennsylvania to DC.
Palmia bullshit.
Bob Bolus, he's all over it. There he is.
That's the other side of the truck. I'm fighting for your inalienable rights.
And a "Don't tread on me" sign.
Nice salmon colored shirt.
Yeah, he put a lot of effort. It's a little busy. Okay.
Wait, what is that? That's just somebody's truck with
That's,
a giant...
I believe, the only truck. It says F Joe Biden.
Oh yeah, I love to fuck Biden and fuck you for voting for him.
Yep.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I'd be so mad.
Hilarious. So edgy. So this is from reporter Julio Cesar Chavez, works for Reuters TV. DC trucker convoy update from Scranton, Pennsylvania. There is currently only one truck in the convoy. Organizer Bob Bullis said
convoy, then?
That they expected more people to join and will call off the convoy if others don't show up. Convoy was scheduled to leave an hour and 45 minutes ago. That was the tweet that came along with that video that we showed you. Just scroll down if you could, Bradley. Bob Bullis is currently driving his truck in a small parade around downtown Scranton. There he is. Now, another update, Bob Bullis is on a highway headed down to DC. I mean, I guess he didn't call it off, even though not many trucks. There's a Let's Go Brandon truck.
Let's Go Brandon. That's so lame.
We have driven up and down the line. His 18-wheeler is the only one in the convoy, followed by 4 or 5 pickup trucks and SUVs that we can tell. All other 18-wheelers passing him. His claim of having 25 trucks driving down is false.
This is the truck convoy in microcosm.
Yep. This thread continues. I just watched the one of Bob Bullis's own work trucks pass him on the highway and continue driving. I fell back right now to count everyone in the convoy as of 11 a.m., assuming everyone driving closer together on the right-hand lane is a part of convoy. There is one 18-wheeler, 2 pickup trucks, 7 sedans / SUVs. So this guy just followed it for a long time. And he did interview Bob Bullis at a certain point, but he said, we've got a few cars, we've got a few people who see what we're doing on social media and everything else. It's like having 10,000 people anyway.
So totally, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Here's a story from a WNEP news out of Scranton, I believe, 16, Lackawanna County. This is from 2012. Scranton businessman sentenced to prison. A Scranton businessman, perhaps known best for his charity work, and we know what we think about charity, it's tax dodge, is locked up. Bob Bullis was sent directly to the Lackawanna County. And anyway, here's a little bit of details. Bob Bullis, Bullis owns Bullis Truck Parts and Towing in Scranton. He was convicted earlier this year of insurance fraud involving one of his company tow trucks. Bullis was convicted earlier this year for filing a false insurance claim for one of his tow trucks involved in a crash back in 2009. Bullis' trucking and towing business made him a lot of money, which he has been generous with. That sounds suspicious. That sounds like there's another revenue stream somewhere. I don't have any information on that, but like, he has a lot of money and he's trying to. I'll just finish his sentence. Bullis' trucking and towing business made him a lot of money, which he has been generous with. He put on a free Christmas dinner for thousands of people in Scranton every year. The dinners were something Bullis had hoped would keep him out of jail.
But then Curb Your Enthusiasm music. Da, 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 you're in jail now.
I mean, I gave you free Christmas dinners, and this is how you repay me?
Bullis was found guilty of filing false insurance claims that would have earned him more than $30,000 in insurance money. So it's not a stretch to assume that there might be some other tax dodging schemes happening.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Nope.
That's what I'm wondering, I guess I'm saying.
I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse is
the Media Accountability Project.
Media Accountability Project's going to come after you. MAP.
Yeah, Bob Bullis.
All right. Well,
Bradley, if I put another clip, I don't know. This is just another. I think it's not really related to Bob Bullis, but just a clip from last week from the Ottawa protests that I think is funny, and I think making fun of these people is fun because I don't think they represent a workers' movement, and all the like Jackson Hinkle and like sort of like bottom feeders. You made a dumbass bet with this, and you showed your ass. And here's your working People's Party.
Take your hands up. I know. You want her to take your ass away from you, but you're going to put that in everybody's ear? Yeah. Just like all your horns. Get away from me now, or your hand might get hit by a
you're not. If you hit her, that'll be the last thing you will ever do, my friend. I promise you.
Why doesn't left go support this guy? He's basically Che Guevara.
Yo, why is he wearing that face diaper? That's
a good question.
Maybe he is on the radical left. Oh, that old woman, not old, but that woman was so sweet. Please stop. You're asking for like, I mean, I'd love to see some guy try this in New York. Like they were they were even please no more. I mean, honestly, like they were really nice about it. Very typically Canadian. Please stop. Please stop. And then he basically threatened that woman with hitting her with the spoon, and he was like, "Don't you dare."
But even the Canadian guy threatening to beat his ass was like very polite about it. He was like, "Oh, if you do that, I might have to do something
I might have to retaliate." Yeah, clowns. I mean, I just honestly,
it's proletariat with their pots and pans.
Right. All right, guys, we're gonna read like 7-ish more IMs because I read a good amount today, and then we are going to head out of here. Bradley dropped something. What'd you drop? His coffee. Okay. All right. We're all right. Left is Best. Oliver Stone's JFK Revisited is an amazing documentary released recently. Surprise, surprise, the anti-communist Dulles brothers played a role in his murder.
Yep. There's a book, Talbot. I can't remember the first name, but The Devil's Chessboard.
Yes. I listened to the like 3-part series that Behind the Bastards did. Took a lot from Devil's Chessboard. Did you listen to that too, Bradley?
Sorry, just wanted to give an update. Looks like Chad is saying some of the pot guy might have been trolling the trucker, so we'll look into that.
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll put that early.
So just wanted to acknowledge what's going on in the chat with the discourse.
That is funny, actually.
Until we get to the bottom of it, then let's just maybe not clip that or whatever.
We'll cut it before that.
Noted. Another Matt, Emma and Matt, as much as I love Sam, I do think you two give the most balanced, contextualized, and honest critiques of anyone in political commentary. Oh,
Sam's unbalanced.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Your work is always thoughtful, earnest, and spiced up with a pinch of sardonic humor. Please keep doing what you do. It keeps me as sane as I can be kept. Thank you, another Matt. The Dirty 630. Hey, Matt, Emma, and Bradley. Great job with everything you guys do. I appreciate all his takes. Can I get a Matt shofar for my beautiful baby girl who was born on Thanksgiving? You want to do it? I can do it. That was good. Also, in relation to the Biden administration's lurch back to austerity, my landlord decided to send someone out of a recent heavy snowstorm to deliver 5-day notices to anyone behind on their rent, myself included. Thankfully, my tax refund is going to keep me housed, but I saw a lot of moving trucks recently. Build Back Better failing hurt a lot of people, so the Dems better get their act together quick. I know. I don't have faith in that happening, though. Maya, ma'am, if you keep doing that, you might get hit by a ladle. It's got to be a Monty Python scene. Well, it makes sense if this guy... I mean, then the mask does make sense a little bit more.
The mask should have been a tip-off. Yeah.
Right. Illuminati kids, I think in Mickelson's head, the idea is that it would make the PGA Tour loosen up or whatever in some way by shaming them through having a way cooler competing league. Yeah. I mean, like, Phil Mickelson, if you guys, I'm not trying to like make fun of anyone's looks, but like he looks like every asshole Republican dad with like some liver spots from drinking way too much brown alcohol that like I really hated being around growing up, that would make weird comments about me or something. That's why I can't root for him, and it's validating that he's kind of a jerk.
That guy screams, "I don't pay my taxes."
Yes, 100%. Just like 3 more at this point. Hard apple cedar. LOL at people criticizing you folks. Y'all have always been on the spot in regards to your analysis from Daily Dot, and the critics lately aren't in good faith. Thank you. Kyle Rittenhouse is an effing murderer. Hey, Emma, read my username again so that miserable little grifter can come at me.
It is funny, like supposedly like taking a civil libertarian standpoint to have your language entirely prescribed by what a judge says.
Yeah. And 2 more. Custodial artist. Are you custodial artist? Why does Kyle sound like a South Park character and or the kid whose parents said they can do no wrong? It might be the latter. And the final I am of the day. Trash weed. The incredibly dehydrated Kyle Rittenhouse has villainous David Byrne big suit energy. I don't quite get that, but he did sound dehydrated.
David Byrne has something with a giant suit, and that is what Kyle looked like in like that rented suit that he had. I mean, how uncomfortable is this guy? You're gonna do a media accountability project and you look that uncomfortable on media. You're swigging water like twice in a 2-minute segment.
Oh my God. Yeah. I would like to hold his tailor accountable, because I don't understand when you do like a dark red shirt with a yellow and gray striped horizontal tie. Like, you gotta find some consistency, bro. And you also are a killer. All right. Thank you guys. Awesome. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you tomorrow. Appreciate you all.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you?